Good morning. Let's see here. Make sure hopefully the internet's good. There we go. We are in the Gospel of Matthew. Let us take a look and see where we are going. Matthew 27, verse 62 says, On the next day, which followed the day of preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees gathered together to Pilate, saying, Sir, we remember that while he was alive, still alive, how that is this deceiver said, After 3 days I will rise. Therefore command that the tomb be made secure until the third day, lest his disciples come by night and steal and say to the people, He has risen from the dead. So the last deception will be worse than the first. Pilate said to them, You have a guard, go your way, make it as secure as you know how. So they went and made the tomb secure, sealing the stone and setting the guard. So what's kind of cool about this guard is that this is a very specific word that speaks of a very specific group of Roman soldiers. This group of Roman soldiers were a professional team of guards, and they were like elite troops. I don't have all of this written down, but I do recall, that each one had a short sword. He carried a javelin, I think, and then he carried a sling, and it was supposed to be like, from a distance of, 40 feet or 50, whatever it is, they were expected to be able to, with their sling, knock a sword or a knife out of someone's hand. And they weren't allowed to fall asleep on their watch, and that if they fell asleep, it was a death penalty. And one of the ways that they would kind of stir up camaraderie, if someone seems like he's falling asleep during a watch, they would, take a torch and light each other's clothes on fire. It sounds like the Navy SEALs of back in the day. But regardless, what we do know is that they were a elite group of soldiers. And it wasn't a group of soldiers that the disciples were going to be fighting their way through anytime soon. I guess that's mostly just a fact. So I could try and go into deeper, but I'd rather not try and dig or draw something out of this more than need to. So chapter 28, verse 1, it says, Now after the Sabbath, as the first day of the week began to dawn, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat on it. His countenance was like lightning, and his clothing as white as snow. And the guards shook for fear of him and became like dead men. But the angel answered and said to the woman, Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen. As he said, Come and see the place where the Lord lay. And go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead, and indeed he is going before you into Galilee. There you will see him. Behold, I have told you. So they went out quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy, and ran to bring his disciples word. Ooh, we're getting really close. Matthew's account is briefer than some of the other accounts. But in short, we see what happens is that the women arrive. Now, what we find is that Jesus is crucified, and they weren't able to go and because it says the women is, I don't know if it says it in this gospel. Did I just read it or not? Okay, the women came with more spices and more things they wanted to put on his body, and so that was kind of the plan. And they were trying to get Jesus off of the cross because of the upcoming Sabbath. And so the idea would be is that all the way until Saturday evening, they wouldn't have been able to go shopping for anything because of the Sabbath. And so really, whether they, and oftentimes stores open up Saturday at 6 p.m. and people kind of rush, and there's a little shopping spree that happens at that time. And so they probably were able to pick up some supplies Saturday night, but they wouldn't be able to actually go out to the tomb at night in the dark and get anything accomplished. So the plan was to get up early and head out there first thing in the morning. And so that's what happened is they go and they went and to the tomb, and there's this angel. The angel had rolled away the stone. The soldiers are afraid because of the glorious appearance of this angelic being. And we see that they go in and they look, and his body's not there. And so the women are told to go and tell the disciples. Some try and take this and make more or make less or make over it, but they had a job to go and tell the disciples. That's what the women did. So they went back and they told the disciples. Now, I'm just going to keep going because I just feel like it this morning. Verse 9, as they went to tell his disciples, behold, Jesus met them, saying, rejoice. So they came and held him by the feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. Go and tell my brethren to go to Galilee, and there they will see me. So we do find that in the end of John, they're going to be on the sea. They're going to be there going out fishing, and they're going to come back and find him. We're going to see Peter and John run back to the tomb. Excuse me, I'm yawning. To try and find Jesus. John is quick to tell us that he was a faster runner than Peter, and so he got there first, which when any two men would write at their own gospel, I'm sure they'd include which one of them was the fastest. And then verse 11 to 15, I think we'll just get to there and we'll save that last chunk for tomorrow. Now, while they were going, behold, some of the guard came into the city and reported to the chief priests all the things that had happened. When they assembled with the elders and consulted together, they gave a large sum of money to the soldiers, saying, tell him his disciples came at night and stole him away while we slept. And if this comes to the governor's ears, we will appease him and make you secure. Because it was a death penalty to fall asleep on the job. So they took their money and did as they were instructed, and this is the saying commonly reported among the Jews until this day. And so I think this is just a good time for us to focus in on one of the key aspects of the Christian faith, one of the most central things that we believe, and that is the resurrection of Jesus. Matthew's account truly is it's very brief, but the main thing is the main thing, that Jesus rose from the grave. Any way you look at it, the resurrection is a verified historical event. Some people like to scoff at that idea or deny it, like, well, you just believe that because it's in the Bible, but it's also outside of the Bible. And so we read Josephus, we read other Roman historians, we read in other places about the resurrection of Jesus. And it's often treated as fact. In fact, that's not just often, that's exclusively how it's treated. It's treated as fact. Historically, in ancient history, it doesn't treat it like a story or a myth. It's treated as a fact. We see the widespread growth of Christianity. Now, Islam grew really fast, but if you study that historically, it grew through conquest. It spread by the sword. Cities were overthrown and people were forced to convert. More soldiers were gathered and more conquests were made and more converts were made through conquest. Christianity was an illegal religion. Before long, it would be a death sentence to become a Christian, and yet it spread all the more rapidly. The great fathers of the faith were a bunch of fishermen and a zealot and a tax collector and all these kind of, odd job kind of guys. And everyone except for John was brutally killed and martyred for their faith. I believe it's Thaddeus who was skinned alive, Simon the Zealot, who was sawn in half, bottom to top, right up the middle. Others were crucified, killed by the sword, stoned to death. And honestly, there's no way to explain the empty tomb. Matthew here, he records that the Jews tried to say, well, the disciples came in and snuck the body out. I mean, there's a counter argument. But if the disciples snuck the body out, how dedicated does one have to be sawn in half from between the legs on up towards your head and never once declare that you stole the body and this is all just a fake? You see, a jihadist will die for what they think is true. But to say the disciples stole the body would be to propose that all of the disciples were brutally killed for what they knew was a lie. That just doesn't seem logical, does it? And so the resurrection of Jesus, it's as factual and historical as really any other history we teach or have been taught. In the reality of it, you and I were educated, most of us public school, and we believe in people like Napoleon, Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great. We believe in these people because that's what we were taught to believe. Well, we were taught rightly so, and in most areas probably, and it's because of history. We have records of these people and we find copies of these stories. But if you use the method and the rule of measure that we use to teach about these other people, Alexander the Great, Pompey, you pick your people, and then you apply the same type of scrutiny to the Bible and to the resurrection, and you find the resurrection is just as real as any of those things. When people kind of say, oh, well, this and that, well, no, that's not how you determine history. And if we use the kind of scrutiny that people want to use for the resurrection, we wouldn't be able to really declare any history, because we have more documentation and consistent and accurate documentation about the resurrection than we do about half the history in the history books, at least ancient history for that matter. And so, apart from prophecy being probably one of the number one ways to explain why Christianity, because that's what God uses in Isaiah, we have the resurrection. And no other religion has a resurrection. Not being biased, just being logical, consistent, and unbiased. Buddha came and lived, and yet he died. His body is buried, the remains of him is still around. Was what he said true or not? I don't know. He's dead. A lot of people believed him, but he's gone. And you could believe him or not. Muhammad came. He lived. He died. His tomb is still with us. His body's still there. Was what he said true? Maybe. Maybe not. A lot of people believed him. There's really no way to know. Jesus came. History records that. He said a lot of stuff. We have it written down. But his tomb is empty. And history records that he rose from the dead to authenticate his message. No one else has that, but we do. And so it's just worth noting that no matter what they tried to do to stop God's plan, they could not stop God's plan because it is God's plan. So know that the resurrection is a great case for what you believe. Watch the Case for Christ movie, read the book, Lee Strobel. It's good. And we will be wrapping up the Gospel of Matthew tomorrow morning, 7:30. I think we're going to go to Exodus. We did Genesis. We'll go back and we'll start in Exodus. It'd be good. And Exodus has got some great stuff in it. That said, too, I'm open, whether we do it with the beginning of Exodus or another time, to maybe switch things up a little bit. I might start doing these on my page again, back on my personal page, not the church one. So you'll have to find me there. And I've also considered mixing up the time. You guys can let me know. Would earlier be better? Because I know a lot of people work and they don't watch because they have to be at work. So things to consider. You can chime in. If you don't chime in, then don't be upset if what you didn't want happens or if what you wanted doesn't happen. You have to voice your opinion for your opinion to be heard. All right. God bless you guys. I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning for the Great Commission. See you then.